Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Emy. So today's video is gonna be a bit different from the previous ones, and I am finally going to talk something that I'm truly passionate about, and that is psychology. So whether you are a psychology fan or simply a human being, today's video is going to be very important. So I am going to review this book. It is called Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me by Carol Travis and Elliot Aronson. So this is a super important book that you must read. It uncovers so many truths about how we think, how we behave, and how we treat other people. And most importantly, it explores one of the most common things we do in our life, and that is self-justification. We self-justify all the time. Recognizing these actions and these self-justifications can help you to improve the way you behave and the way you make decisions, and therefore hopefully improve your life as well. So I have finished reading this book just a few days before, and the way I have decided to make these book reviews is to pick up 5 citations from the book and just kind of expand on them and talk you through them to make it more interesting and easier to follow. So before I begin, there is one key crucial concept that you must understand, and that is the concept of cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance refers to when there is conflicting attitudes, feelings, and thoughts in your mind. So you will feel very uncomfortable and you will actively seek ways to reduce this discomfort. And this is where self-justification kicks in. We as human beings all have this need to reduce the discomfort we feel when something inside our mind is in conflict with the other thing. And this is basically what the entire book is about, how we use self-justification to reduce this discomfort and the consequences this mechanism would bring. So the first quote: the more costly a decision in terms of time, money, effort, or inconvenience, and the more irrevocable its consequences, the greater the dissonance and the greater the need to reduce it by overemphasizing the good things about the choice made. So I personally find this point very interesting because it is very practical, right? So when we put a lot of energy and time and money into something, so let's say we're trying to buy a car, no one would go on and say, after all the money and energy and effort they put in, that this car is garbage. Oh, I wish I haven't bought it. If the car is good, then everything is good. If the car is not that good, your mind will make it good by overemphasizing the good part of it, because you simply have this inner need to reduce the dissonance between the not good of the car and all of the energy and money you've put in. So this is a mechanism of self-justification. You will self-justify the fact that the money and effort and energy you've put in are worth of that car. And as the book outlines, this has a very practical implication, right? When we're trying to buy something, or let's say take a course or go to a therapist, so these are all decisions that would involve a lot of energy, time, and money. You shouldn't go to people who have already taken this course, bought this thing, or consulted this therapist, because you know that all human beings have this inner need to self-justify, meaning that even though that therapist, that thing, or that course is not good, they would say it's good. Or even if they do not say it's good, at least they won't say it's bad, because they have this inner need to reduce the discomfort, the dissonance between the time and energy they put in and the quality of that same therapist or course, right? So the book says that instead we should, when we're trying to get advices from people, we should seek those people who are like us in the process of making this decision, because those people are the people who are open-minded. They do not have this this dissonance going on within them, and they are more likely to offer us the advices that we need and the advices that are helpful to us. Okay, let's talk about the second one. The brain is designed with blind spots, optical and psychological, and one of its cleverest tricks is to confer on its owner the comforting delusion that he or she does not have any. So here the author is actually making a very important and interesting point about naive realism, which is the concept that we human beings think, we view the world clearly and objectively. And therefore all of our judgments are true and correct. It is the other people who are biased and who are subjective about their judgments and opinions. So these are our psychological blind spots, which make us very difficult to admit that we have made a mistake, because we think we are viewing the world from a very clear viewpoint, and therefore all of the judgments we have must be true, because if they're not true, we would not hold them. So here I would like to bring in a quote from Thomas Carlyle, who says that the greatest fault is to be conscious of none. So as we navigate through our life, we're constantly categorizing people. They as them and we as us. We are always right, they are always wrong. So this is even if you are not sometimes consciously aware of this thought process, it is actually happening when you're making decisions or giving an opinion. And we often use stereotypes to justify the behaviors that otherwise would make us feel bad. So when we're judging a particular group as being minor, there will be a sort of dissonance creating in our mind between the bad nature of discrimination and we as good people. So bad and good would create this sort of dissonance and discomfort that make us feel bad. So in this case, self-justification comes in, right? We would use stereotypes to judge the other people as being a group who deserves this sort of behavior, discriminatory behavior towards them, so that we would say, oh, it's not that we are actually behaving bad, it's because they deserve this. So we bring them to the same level in order to reduce this dissonance. So as the author says, prejudice is our self-justifying servant. And this is very true. We use prejudice to justify all the bad behaviors we have carried out towards members of particular racial groups or gender groups. So I just want to make a further point about Abraham Lincoln as we stay in this topic. So I've heard of this man when I was in like 10th grade when we're doing philosophy, and again in this book I have reheard of him. So he was one of the rare presidents who understood the importance of surrounding himself with people who disagree with him, because he realizes the fact that he is not a machine. So he does not view the world from a completely objective way, and therefore not all of his judgments are true, no matter how reasonable they seem to be. So I think the clever part of this man is that he realizes the fact that disagreements can be good, especially if you are aware of your blind spots, because these disagreements can lead to new ideas, new perspectives being explored, and therefore a better decision to be made with the group as a whole. So I think this point also has a really important implication, and that is we have to realize that we have blind spots. A lot of times we do not realize, but our mind is constantly self-justifying all the behavior we carry out. So we are not an objective machine that observes the world from an objective approach. Rather, we have this sort of biases and schemas that guide us when interpreting the world. So it's just not being influenced by the naive realism, because that can often lead us to make decisions that might not be the best for us. Okay, so the third one. Memory smooths out the wrinkles of dissonance by enabling the confirmation bias to hum along, selectively causing use to forget discrepant, disconforming information about beliefs we hold dear. Okay, so memory is a huge topic in psychology, and it covers actually one entire chapter within this book. So the authors have described memory as our personal, live-in, self-justifying historian. You may not believe it, but memory rewrites history. So if we have made a mistake, our memory helps us to remember that they were made by other people. So you've probably heard about the word victim narrative. So that is when you ask someone who has suffered to recall his or her experiences. So it is interesting to see that many research has shown that when you ask the victim to recall the ways he or she suffered, he or she can tell you tons of things, many of them exaggerated and unrealistic a lot of times. So they try to enlarge the pain that they have suffered in order to truly reveal, to portray themselves as victims, right? And when the researchers asked them to recall some occasions or circumstances in which they have actually hurt other people, they could not recall any of them. So it's interesting to see how self-justification comes into play even in these occasions, right? So the victim has in his or her head this image of him or herself as a victim. And even if they do, so victims are by definition people who suffer, right? And when the researchers asked them to recall instances in which they have hurt other people, this behavior of hurting other people is not compatible with the image of the victim. So again, there is this disconnection and dissonance between the two things. So our memory helps us to forget all of those instances in which the victims have caused harms to other people in order to bring the two things to the same level, and again reducing that dissonance and discomfort. So, and it is not surprising that especially with parent-children relationship, there have been thousands of studies that are carried out in these fields. Researchers ask parents to recall instances in which children have behaved badly. Parents can write a book about it. But when they ask the parents to recall instances in which they have treated the children in an unfair way, they could not recall any. And the same thing is for children, but in a reversed way. So we can see how self-justification is constantly playing a role in our lives, even in our daily life. So the implication from this point is that when you think that you haven't, hurt other people or have done something bad, try to think about the possibility that you have actually done something bad. It's just that your memory is not, helping you to recall them. So, yeah, that is basically everything about this point that I want to say. Memory can be really, really powerful when it comes to justifying our actions. So, the fourth one. Yet, the inherent privacy of the interaction means that therapists who lack training in science and skepticism have the internal corrections to the self-protecting cognitive biases that afflict us all. What these therapists see confirms what they believe, and what they believe shapes what they see. So, this chapter is kind of a very interesting one. It is all about science and scientific method. And when I first read this chapter, I was surprised as well, because the authors are basically criticizing a lot of the methods that the therapists use when treating patients. And I asked myself, how does self-justification come into play? Well, it plays a huge role in a lot of therapists. So I'm not sure whether you are familiar with this concept of falsifiability or not, but that is basically something that the two authors have brought up, mentioning the name of Karl Popper, who is the scientist who proposed this concept. So what the two authors are basically saying is that the methods the therapists use with their patients are not scientific. And let me just give you an example to explain it better, because it is quite a confusing concept here. So, if a strategy adopted by a therapist is effective, they would say, "Oh, great, my strategy is working." If it does not, they would say, "Oh, too bad. The patient is too severe with this disorder, or they must have done something wrong. They must have not followed my instructions well." So can you see that in this case, the therapist is actually practicing self-justification? And this is also where the concept of falsification comes into play, because whatever the results, the therapist always blames the other side to have done something wrong, without realizing that his or her own strategy could be not effective. And this again returns to our first point, right? When you have put a lot of effort and time and energy into something, in this case into developing a strategy and spending time with the patient, you would not want to admit the fact that all of these things you've put into is just give you a rubbish result. No one would like to admit this, because the sense of discomfort is too big. So in this case again, the results and your strategy and all the time and energy you put into this strategy, when they're not in the same level, when there is again this disconnection, your mind will self-justify to bring them to the same level by blaming the other side. You're just saying, it's not that my strategy is not effective, it's the patient has done something wrong. Again, reducing the distance between the two. So although this chapter is very much about science, scientific methodology, and falsification, it does show us how even in professional realms like trained therapy, there could be all of this self-justification is going on, and this has a lot of severe consequences because it then leads to repeated ineffective strategies in some cases, and therefore not being able to cure the patients. Okay, the final one. This is actually taken from the final chapter. When we ourselves are forced to face our own mistakes and take responsibility for them, the result can be an exhilarating, liberating experience. So, I think this has one clear message. We should all bravely face our own mistakes. So there are a lot of people, even right now, just sit down and look around. People always run away from their mistakes, as if they run away, the mistakes are done by the others. So this is clearly a self-deceiving technique. And the reason why people run away from their mistakes, as outlined in this book, in a very clear way, is that we often associate our identity with what we have done. So if your self-image is that you consider yourself to be very clever, intelligent, hardworking person who deserves the best things in the world, and then suddenly you have made some mistakes that have very severe consequences, this would somehow harm or destroy your self-image, your positive self-image. And all of us have this inner need to protect and maintain a positive self-image. It's just human nature, right? We all want us to be good, and none of us would want to perceive ourselves in a very bad way. So this makes it very difficult for people to actually admit the fact that they have made some mistakes, because if they do so, they think those mistakes would somehow harm their self-image. But what we do not realize is that what we did can be separated from who we are and who we want to be. And as the book outlines clearly, our past selves need not to be a blueprint for our future selves. For example, stealing. I think everyone has done some sort of stealing when they were young. I stole something when I was like 8-9 years old. But there's no reason for which I shouldn't admit this, because I know that who I am includes what I have done, but is not determined by what I have done, because we cannot always live in the past, right? We have this entire future to look forward. And for me, those actions that I take in the future are more representative of who I am. So the important thing to realize here is that, as the book outlines, who you are includes what you have done, but is not totally determined by what you have done. Even if you have made a mistake, that's okay. Admit it. Don't just let the process of self-justification to guide you to run away from those mistakes. And because that would, every decision you make would have a consequence in your life. And the decision to self-justify and run away from mistakes also have consequences in your life.